Okay, so now we're going to look at two-way tables, Venn diagrams, and probability. And the reason... Hold on here. Okay, so the reason why we're going to look at two-way tables, Venn diagrams, are because we're going to look at the relationships between two events. And when we look at the relationships of two events like A and B, we also have to look at the relationship of them not occurring. So when I look at my table, I'm looking at these tables here where we have the probability of A and AC. So the probability of A occurring and the probability of A not occurring. And then I look at the probability of B and the probability of BC, which is the complement of B, or B not occurring. Because we want to look at the relationships between all of them and how they all play into each other. And so we've got our two-way tables, which I tend to prefer, but we've also got Venn diagrams. And each person's brain works a little bit differently. We also have tree diagrams that we'll be talking about this chapter, but we're going to first initially look at two-way tables and Venn diagrams. So the very first thing I want to talk about is the probability of A. So if I'm trying to calculate the probability of A, then what I'm going to look at is in my table, I'm going to look at A. And so I'm going to look at adding up these pieces because these are all the probability of A occurring. And usually when I'm looking at the probability of A, this out here will help tell me my probability of A, if it's in a proportion. If it's not, then I take this value out here and I put it over the total, and that will give me my probability. So if I'm looking at just numbers in the table, I take this number right here and I put it over the total, which usually pops up right here, and that helps me find that probability of A. And we'll see how this works in a little bit. When I'm looking at a Venn diagram, I want to look at my entire circle A. So in this case, my entire circle A is going to be this circle. And so this is my A, which means I'm going to have a number here and a number here. So for A, I need both parts. So I would have to add those together to find my total value of A, which translates to up here where I have my number here and my number here, and then everything that's added up should pop up right here. And so that's going to help me tell my probability. And again, for probability, if they're just counts, then I should go ahead and add those up and divide by the total, which is usually right here. And if it's not, if it's written as decimals like 0.29, like proportions, then I can just add those up and that should tell me my full probability. Okay, the next example is going to be the probability of B. So very similar to the probability of A, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the whole column B. So I'm going to have a number here, I'm going to have a number here. So B is when I'm adding up those two numbers. And so that total should exist right here. So that's my total value for B, and then I divide by the total number for the entire situation. Now when I'm looking at my graph in the circle, this would be my B circle. And so I'd want to add in these two numbers right here. And so the biggest mistake that I see when you're looking at the probability of B in a Venn diagram is the person will only look at this number here, which B is everything inside the circle. So you have to make sure that these values are added together, because B is both of those values together. Okay, the probability of A complement. So the complement of A. Oops, I didn't realize I was still in pen mode. Okay, so the probability of A complement, which means the probability of A not occurring. So I would take this whole section here with the total being written out here. So I would add this number and this number for my total value that would exist right here. Now in the Venn diagram, A complement will be everything not in the circle. So then if this is my A circle, I want the values that are not in there. So this number and this number out here. That's what we're looking at. Because I want everything out here. Everything outside of this. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is the probability of B complement. So B complement will be both of these values added together. And it's usually written down below. So this number plus this number, usually written right down here. Now for B complement, we would then be looking at that B circle. So here's my B circle, and I want anything that's not in the circle. So this number plus this number would tell me my B complement, because it's everything outside of that circle. Okay, so those are the separate individual ones. Now we're going to start looking at relationships between the two. So now I'm going to look at the probability of A and B. So let's see, I'm starting to run out of color. So the probability that A and B are both occurring. This is known as the intersection. And so for that, I would look at A intersect B. So where the A row crosses with the B column. And this is the probability of A or B, A and B. How it looks like in my Venn diagram, it's going to be this number right here, that one overlapping portion. So this number and this number. Now remember, if they're counts, then we take that number over the total. If they're already written as proportions, then we just use that as a proportion. Because we're going to see both. So we might as well kind of get used to that idea that we're going to see multiple things. Okay, let's look at our next one. We're going to do A or B. They're mutually exclusive in this situation, and this is the union. So the probability of A or B when they're mutually exclusive. So this is a little key here. Since they're mutually exclusive, they cannot exist at the same time. So all of a sudden, this number here becomes 0. And that's why our circles look like they don't overlap, because they don't. There is no value in between. So if it was a true like 2-circle thing here, this number would be 0, because when they're mutually exclusive, they cannot exist. And so when we're looking at this, mathematically, the probability of A or B should be this number, because that's my total probability of A, plus this number, because that's my total probability of B. The interesting thing is this will also be this number, and this should also be that number, because of the idea that this is 0. Which means it's this number plus this number. Okay, so our next situation now is A or B, but now they're inclusive. So now we're going to be looking at this idea of them being inclusive, so they can happen at the same time. So A or B means I'm going to take all of the B's, I'm going to add up all the A's with it. And remember how we get that overlapping. So when we're looking at this, we're going to start seeing this number plus this number plus this number, all added up in the Venn diagram. Now up here it gets to be a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to try and color code this. So you can add up these 3 numbers. So number plus number plus number. Because what it does is it isolates each one of these and ignores the fact that that's counted twice. It doesn't really ignore it, but it accounts for that because we're looking at the 3 individual pieces. But, oh, I need a different color than that. We could also look at this number plus this number minus them both happening. And that's our true definition up here, where we're taking number plus number in green and we're subtracting what's in the circle. So using that table gives us many options on how we can calculate that. I can add up the blue number signs or hashtag symbols, or I can go to the totals for A and B, and I could subtract what's in the circle, those repeaters. So we get options there with the table. And I like options. I like having that with my table. Okay, our last situation, the probability of A complement and B complement. So now we're looking at A complement and B complement at the same time. That should be this number right here. And this is a not A and a not B. When you're talking about A complement and B complement in the Venn diagram, it's all of this extra space out here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at a couple problems because I think it makes more sense in context of a problem. Okay, what is the relationship between educational achievement and home ownership? A random sample of 500 people who participated in the 2000 census was chosen. Each member of the sample was identified as a high school graduate or not, and as a homeowner or not. The two-way table displays this data. So this is actual counts. So when I'm calculating the probability, I'm going to have to divide by my total number of people. So we're going to be dividing by the 500 to turn those into percentages or proportions. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a Venn diagram to represent our two events. And our two events are high school graduate and homeowner. So I'm going to look at my high school graduate. I'll go ahead and label that high school graduate is my pink circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and my homeowner is going to be my blue circle. Okay, so my homeowners is in blue. And now this is something that I tend to do just kind of for myself. So my total high school graduates is 310. And I like writing that there so I don't have to add it later on. And my total homeowners is 340. Now this is broken up into parts of the circle. So when I'm looking at my high school graduates, I actually have two numbers. I have the 221 and the 89. So inside my circle, I have the 221 is also in my blue area. So this is my overlapping portion. So my 221 of my high school graduates are also in the homeowner circle. But my leftover part that are not in the homeowners would be over here. And that's how I get the idea that for my high school graduates of 310 are really these two numbers added together. And it shows how it's broken up. These are high school graduates that do not own homes. These are high school graduates that do own homes. And then when I look at my blue numbers, so now I'm looking at my 340, these are my homeowners. So now I've got the 221 that's in my pink area. So this is also 221 are both pink and blue. And then I have 119 that are not high school graduates. And now the only thing I have left is for the outside box. So when I'm looking at my outside box, I want to know how many of those people are not homeowners and not high school graduates. And that's this number right here, that's 71. And sometimes I even put down my total down here. So that way as I'm looking at my Venn diagram, I have lots of information there. But what I really prefer is my table, because for me, tables are just better, but that's just my brain and how it works. Okay, so we drew our Venn diagram that illustrated that. Some people work better with tables, some people work better with Venn diagrams. It's all okay. What is the probability of A? What's the probability that this is a high school graduate? So probability of a high school graduate, that was our pink. So we had altogether 310 high school graduates out of 500 people. And we can get that from our table. I have 310 total high school graduates. Or I could look at my pink circle and add these two values for my total number of high school graduates. And then I can simplify that fraction. Luckily, my zeros will cancel out. It's the same thing as dividing top and bottom by 10. And we get 31 out of 50. And we can even turn that into a proportion, which would be 0.62. Okay, the probability of A intersect with B. So this is, it's both A and B. So I'm looking at pink and blue. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the part at where they overlap. So that can be right here, or that could be right here, the part where they overlap. So 221 out of 500. And you could try and reduce it, or you can just go ahead and type into your calculator 221 divided by 500. Which is 0.442. Now A union B. So A union B means it can be A or B. So that means I've got several options here. I can add up all the parts of what are A and B. So this part of just A, this part of A and B, and this part of just B. So I could do 89 plus 221 plus 119 all over 500. So 429 out of 500. 0.858. Now I do have another option. I could actually go ahead and, so in my table, this is what I would have done. I would have added up these three values. Or I can now go ahead and say, okay, here's my total A. Here's my total B. And subtract those that are in both. And I should get the same value. So 310 plus 340 minus 221 gives me that 429. So again, either way works out the same. I can look at the little individual pieces. That's what I like about the table. Or I can take my totals, and subtract the ones that were counted twice. Okay, my diagram's starting to look a little complicated here, so I'm going to erase some of this. Okay, next one, we're going to go ahead and the probability of A complement. So A is high school graduates, so I want to know not high school graduates. So luckily my total is right here for that. So 190 out of 500. Should be 0.38. Now over here what I can do is I want not high school graduate. So if this is my high school graduate, I could have also done 500, which is my total, minus my high school graduates, and figure out how many are not. And then put that over 500. So that's using that idea of a complement, which still gives me the 190 over 500. Okay, and our last one, the probability of A union B complement. So when I'm looking at my diagram, A union B, so it can be A or B. So this is A or B complement. So something that's not in either one of those, which is leaves only that 71. So when I look up here, this is my A, B, or B, A or B. And anything that's not that would be my complement. So that's going to give me my 71 over 500. So lots of different ways of looking at things, and you'll find one way works best for your brain. Sometimes they'll give you a table, but if you can turn a table into a Venn diagram and you like Venn diagrams better, you can. If they give you a Venn diagram, you can turn it into a table if you like the tables better. So lots of different ways to go about this probability. And again, you'll see me using the tables more because that's what I prefer. But that's just my brain. So I'll try and make sure that I'm showing all options for everyone's brains. Okay, phone usage. According to the National Center for Health Statistics, in December 2008, 78% of households had a traditional landline, 80% had cell phones, and 60% had both. Suppose we randomly selected a household in December 2008. So this one's a little different because instead of giving us actual counts, they gave us percentages which will turn into proportions. So we're going to go ahead and make a two-way table. So we have landline or no landline. We're also going to have, I left myself lots of room for this one, and then we have cell and no cell. So now we're going to go ahead and fill in our information. So what we know is that 78% had a landline. So I'm going to come over here and my total landline is 78%. Now 80% had cell phones, so my total cell phone should be 80%. So now I could figure out no landline because these are mutually exclusive. I can do 1 minus 0.78 and that should tell me how many had no landline, so 22%. And then I can look at my cell, 80%. Those that did not have cell would be 20%. Now it's time to start filling in the inside information. And so what we know is that 60% had both. So I'm going to go to landline and cell phone, this value, and that's going to be my 60%. And now I should be able to fill in the rest, because if I know that this total area right here should be 80%, that means this has to be 0.20. And then if this total area has to be 0.78, then this would have to be 0.18. And if this total area has to be 0.22, then this has to be 0.02. And it allows me to fill in that table with my information. So now I could go ahead and go to drawing a Venn diagram from here, or I could draw a Venn diagram at the beginning. So I could do a land. I can do cell. And then they tell me that I have 60% of both. So this is my 60%, which means that if my landline was 78%, that leaves me 0.18 here. And if my cell phone was 80%, that leaves me 0.20 here. Which then I'd want to figure out, well, how much is left over to make my 100%? And so I can add these all up and subtract from 1, which is 100% in proportion form. And I'd get that leftover 0.02. And so there's my Venn diagram to help out. So now we're going to go ahead and answer our questions. So the first question is find the probability the household has at least one type of the two phones. So we can have land or cell. So this goes back to, I can add up land, both, cell, and that can give me my total. Or I could take my total for cell, my total for land, and subtract those that were counted twice in those. And that should also give me my 0.98. Okay, find the probability the household has a cell phone only. So only a cell phone, not a landline. So I'd be looking at my cell phone. So here's my cell phone with a land. Here's my cell phone with no land. So over here, I'd be looking at, these are all my cell phones. This is the one that has no landline, which gives me that 0.2. Find the probability that the household has no phone whatsoever. So no land, no cell. The only thing I have left is the 0.02. And that's it.